So you see how we have the orange bar here. We don't for jQuery, but then for the next 5 connections, we see that orange bar again, and then we don't see it show up for the rest of the downloads. The reason for this is that the handshake that happens with the initial connection will stay open until all of the files have downloaded, but only one file can download at a time with that connection. By default, Chrome, the browser, will open up 6 simultaneous connections, so it can download 6 things at the same time from that server. Once it's opened up those 6 connections, the browser will wait until a file downloads completely before starting to download something else in one of those connections. Now what happened up here is that the browser downloaded the index file, and then as soon as it was done, the browser started parsing out that index file, and the first thing that it ran into was a reference to the jQuery.js file. So it started downloading that right away. As the HTML continued to get parsed by the browser, it found a reference to the flex slider CSS, and since it was already using that first connection that it opened for the index.html file, because it was downloading jQuery.js, it opened up a new connection and started downloading this CSS file. And at about the same time, as the browser looked through that HTML file and found references to different CSS and JavaScript files, it started downloading each one of them until it reached the maximum number of connections that it could have, which was 6. And so even though Sifter.js came right after microplugin, it had to wait until a connection was open, which is why we see this gray bar all the way up to here. And the end of this gray bar, which denotes its stalled time, lines up with one of the other resources getting completely downloaded, probably flexslider.css or selecteyes.css. Once one of these got done downloading, then that connection that had already been opened up was free to download something else. So it started downloading this file. And you can see how there were several files that ended at about the same time, these 2 up here, and then these 2 here. So 4 different files, and you can see 4 different files right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, starting to download at about the same time too, since all of these connections opened up at about the same time. This next one had to wait a little bit longer until this one was done. And then over here, it looks like something different is happening, since there were some free connections, but these weren't downloading. That's because the browser didn't know to download these files until it started parsing the CSS that referenced them. This includes our slideshow background image, which is referenced in our CSS, and our 2 fonts that were also referenced in CSS. So this gap right here is really the time it took the browser to parse out the CSS and see that it needed to download some additional resources. At the bottom of the CSS file is a reference to our map, which is something that we won't usually need on production, but that we've been using locally in order to map our CSS over to our Sass to make it easier to identify where the CSS rules are coming from. And then finally we have an author1.jpg, which defies all the rules and loads at the very end here.